Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Beth.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie is here.
I'm Michelle Duke, Britain's news channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection, tune in to GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact is Trump made a good start. No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we are proud to stand for you, for the Britain you love, for the communities you live in. That's what makes us the fearless champions of Britain. Its voices and its values. Because we, at GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. We are in the month named after Juno, the Roman goddess of marriage and childbirth, a part of the calendar that is noted for new growth and the celebration of life. I hope that you'll feel suitably stimulated after 2 hours of politics, world affairs and ethics and arts on Sunday with Michael Portillo. The government seems to be moving left at high speed in response to complaints from its backbenches. There are major new commitments to public spending, and the Prime Minister has sided with Ed Miliband against his Chancellor of the Exchequer. Will that bring further economic woes, and does it make Labour an easier target for Reform UK? My panel will discuss. Wednesday saw a dramatic development in the Russia-Ukraine war, as 100 Ukrainian drones pierced deep into Russian territory. Russia has responded with the most deadly attacks yet on Ukrainian civilians. We will discuss how the nature of war is being changed during this conflict and ask whether Britain is learning. Diplomat, agent, conspirator, journalist and master of propaganda Sir Robert Bruce Lockhart played interesting roles in both world wars. Yet despite a life of high drama, he died almost forgotten and nearly penniless. I'll interview the author of his biography, The Rogue Agent. I'll be joined by the British canoeist, suspended from competing after launching an OnlyFans account to fund his Olympic dream. With top athletes struggling to make ends meet, should that means of funding be banned? But first of all, your news headlines with Sam Francis.
Michael, thank you, and a very good morning to you. Just coming up to 2 minutes past 11. The top story this morning, the UK has pledged a fulsome response to security concerns after reports the US warned against allowing a Chinese embassy to be built near London's financial district. The technology secretary said any issues would be handled through the planning process. But Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp has called a proposal a security risk, warning it could serve as a hub for Chinese espionage near critical data infrastructure. He says the embassy should not be approved, echoing concerns reportedly raised by the White House. More than 60,000 NHS appointments were cancelled during just 5 days of strike action last summer, including many for cancer patients. Figures seen exclusively by GB News reveal that 63,800 procedures were scrapped during the July 2024 walkout, including vital biopsies, blood tests and X-rays. The Health Secretary is now urging doctors to reconsider further strike plans, warning the disruption risks delaying life-saving diagnosis. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch says employers should have the right to ban staff from wearing burqas and other face coverings in the workplace. Speaking to the Sunday Telegraph, she said she wouldn't allow veiled visitors into her constituency surgeries and believes staff should dress by choice, not community or family pressure. UK law allows dress codes but requires any restriction on religious clothing to be proportionate and for a legitimate reason. Her comments are likely to spark fresh debate on religious freedom and workplace rights. The government has announced an £86 billion science and tech investment plan ahead of this week's spending review, funding breakthroughs in drug research, battery tech and microchip design included. Chancellor Rachel Reeves says the package will boost jobs and national security with £500 million ring-fenced for local-led innovation. Critics, though, warn inflation, high visa costs and education shortfalls could undermine the ambition. Reeves has admitted tough choices lie ahead and says not every department will get what they want. In the United States, the fallout between Donald Trump and Elon Musk is fueling fears over deep cuts to NASA's science program, with 40 missions now at risk. The White House is proposing slashing NASA's budget by nearly a quarter, with critics warning it could be the agency's worst crisis in decades. Trump has threatened to withdraw contracts with Musk's SpaceX, which NASA relies on to reach the Moon and Mars. Space experts say vital climate and planetary missions could be scrapped. Back here on Earth, Sir David Attenborough has urged urgent action to save the world's oceans, telling Prince William we must act before we destroy this great treasure.
The thing which I am appalled by when I first saw the shots that were taken for this film are what we have done to the deep ocean floor.
The pair was speaking after a private screening of Ocean, a new documentary narrated by Sir David Attenborough exposing the damage from overfishing and deep-sea trawling. William, who calls Attenborough his inspiration, will address world leaders at a marine summit in Monaco, urging urgent and optimistic action. The film supports protecting 30% of marine areas by 2030, a goal that both men say could help the oceans recover. Those are the latest headlines just after 11 o'clock. A full roundup in an hour's time. Now, though, it's back to Michael.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sam Francis. The government that once boasted an iron chancellor is racking up public spending promises. The winter fuel allowance cut is being largely reversed. Free school meals will be extended to another 500,000 children. The restriction that child benefit could be paid for only 2 children per family is likely to go. £30 billion extra is to be given to an unreformed National Health Service. And the Prime Minister has opposed the Chancellor's attempt to cut the budget for home insulation. The administration has apparently lurched to the left. What will be the impact on taxation and the economy? And will these moves make Labour an easier target for reform? Joining me now is my panel. The Deputy Editor of Spiked Online, Fraser Myers, the former Conservative political advisor, James Price, and the political commentator, Alice Grant. Welcome to you all. Good morning. Fraser, may I start with you? Is my analysis right or wrong? Is the government racking up public spending promises? Is it moving to the left?
I think it would be wrong to attribute any sense of direction to this government. If there's anything that we know about Keir Starmer is that he has no principles at all. It would be wrong to characterise him as left, right, centre, anything like that. He has flip-flopped on just about everything. But the danger with an empty vessel is that it has to be filled with something. So I think it's true that at the moment it seems as if he is panicking. He's listening to perhaps some of his more left-wing backbenchers who are a bit restive. But, you know, we are going to see public spending cut broadly, or not cuts, but, you know, we are in the context of the spending review where a lot of departments are going to be making cuts, or at least cuts to, you know, in the context, actually, it's cuts to future spending, or spending doesn't grow as fast as it would. So I think a lot of these announcements are being made to placate people on the left, even when the broader picture is actually a lot of departments will get cut.
But the list of promises, sticking with you, Fraser, the list of promises we've seen there, you cannot expect after that list of promises that there will overall be a cut, can you?
No,
because
no.
We're talking here about big increases for big departments. And by and large, the budgets of other departments are quite small. Policing is relatively small, for example.
I mean, of course, the irony is that, you know, the Iron Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, so-called, she massively increased public spending, massively increased borrowing at the last budget. So already this has been set in motion, this increase in public spending. I mean, a lot of it did end up going on wages for public sector workers rather than on actual projects that might, you know, boost growth or anything like that. So we are already there, I think. That phase is already in motion of increasing public spending.
Alice Grant, do you think we're at a significant moment where the government appears to be changing direction, or do you go with Fraser and just say, well, it's all chaos and it could just change back?
There's definitely an element of chaos in this. However, on the broader question of whether they are going to push more voters to parties such as Reform, I think, of course, we've always known that Keir Starmer and his Labour government were left-wing, even if they seemed to be centrist and trying to attract sort of the middle ground of voters. I think they are definitely outwardly very socialist on many areas, but I think particularly what the focus will be on is the 13.6 billion, which is still being allocated to this green, renewable, net zero target, which is just unbelievable. If you think about how our economy is in dire need of help in so many other areas, they're still ploughing ahead with the net zero agenda, even though that is one thing that I think voters are absolutely sick of. And of course, this is under the scheme of the warm houses, but that's precisely what many people haven't really had because of such policies.
There's no reason why panellists should agree with each other, but so far, Keir Starmer is being accused of two different things. One is having no sense of direction, and the other is being basically left-wing. Which do you think it is fundamentally?
I think he's left-wing. I think that, but also in the sense that no, you don't necessarily need a precise sense of direction to be implementing policies which are socialist or damaging. I mean, he's someone who tried to renegotiate the withdrawal agreement with the EU. Whether that is like pushing us towards a clear direction, it's less clear. However, that obviously shows a complete disregard for all the voters who voted for Brexit and who care very much about our territorial waters and everything else promised in that referendum.
James, there is to me a bit of a puzzle here. I understand that governments are influenced by their backbenchers, but this government has a huge majority. I rather agree that this is a Prime Minister without a great sense of direction, and therefore I don't quite understand why at the moment he's headed in the direction which seems to me likely to damage his party at the polls and help Reform UK. Can you help me with that dilemma?
Was it Robert Conquest said the best way to understand any organisation is to assume it's run by a cabal of its enemies? And that might be a good way to work out most political parties at the moment. I think the problem is you have a Labour Party that does have a sort of ideological tradition, going back a certain way, that has bent with the times and context, like all parties do. But you've got a leader, I agree, who doesn't believe in very much at all. You've got a chancellor who doesn't believe in very much at all. And crucially, the party got elected without really having any scrutiny of what it said it was going to do in government, comes into government by default, really, by my party, the Conservatives, losing more than them actually winning anything. And therefore, they're completely floundering. And I think that's why you do need to have actual ideologies and beliefs. And unlearn a whole system and way of viewing the world, because when a new topic comes up, a new crisis emerges, you have a set of tried and tested ideas. Do you think that more government is going to be the answer, yes or no? Do you think that the state can spend money better than families and businesses or individuals, yes or no? I don't think Starmer thinks very much about those things. To the extent he does, he's a creature of the blob, he's a statist, and I think our problem has been far too much state and far too much spending, not too little. And I think he's not going to be able to get out of that mind-forged manacle and make anything better.
But your answer adds to the mystery, because if this man believes in nothing, then he should be interested in getting himself re-elected. And it seems to me that the direction which he's headed now is the least likely direction in which to get himself re-elected. Is the power of the backbenchers so strong, even when you have this tremendous majority, that they become more important to you than this goal of winning the next election?
Yeah, I think you're right that a politician, if they were acting rationally, should be about being re-elected. And I think in one ear he's got his chief of staff, Morgan McSweeney, this chap who's desperate for him to actually get re-elected. And he was the guy who drove this Island of Strangers speech and talking about reducing immigration. And I think that would be a big vote winner were Labour able to do it. And then, as you say, on the other side, you've got backbenchers who've got no understanding about economics or how the world works, which is why they're pushing Ed Miliband to do the kind of crazy net zero stuff Alice was just talking about. You've also, if Starmer has a third ear to shout into here, you've got the kind of civil service statist people going, oh, no, we can fix all of that, don't worry about getting business involved, don't worry about actual reality of how economics works or anything. Let me do it, let the civil service keep doing things. Well, we've seen what happens when the Conservative Party lost its own small state ideas and didn't push back against the civil service. We led to rack and ruin, and I think that's happening again now. So we're being pulled in different directions, and none of them are good.
Fraser, the First Lord of the Treasury siding with a minister against the Chancellor of the Exchequer, this spells trouble, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I think in broad terms, I think it's worth saying that the public is probably in favour of higher spending. It's just the question of what we're spending it on. So restoring the winter fuel payment, will they get any credit for that? I don't know, but that seems to be pretty essential for Labour to recover some lost ground. And actually, that's a good indication. If you look back at where that came from, that was basically the Treasury telling them that it needed to happen. It was the civil servants actually setting the direction of travel there. And funnily, for whatever reason, the Labour Party not having a sort of political antenna didn't realise how disastrous that would be. And that was one of the things that kept coming up on the doorstep in the local elections. So some of those things have to be... It's fair enough that they're making a U-turn on those things, but... Yeah.
I want James, with his recent experience of government, to pick up on this point. I think the Prime Minister siding with a minister against the Chancellor of the Exchequer really is a serious matter, really does lead you into deep doo-doo.
Yeah,
your view.
Absolutely right. We saw that Cameron and Osborne, for all their many faults, had learned that lesson of where Tony Blair and Gordon Brown spent all of their time fighting against each other rather than perhaps thinking about the interests of the country. And Osborne and Cameron, again, for their problems, learned the mistakes of that and worked together in lockstep. The Treasury is far and away the most powerful bit of the government, and it can normally overrule ministers, which is why it seems so odd that, as you say, Keir Starmer is siding with, of all people, Ed Miliband. I think broadly what this means is that Labour don't have much of a theory about how to improve the economy. And with Reform following them in some of this stuff, I think a bit of a massive own goal of saying they would scrap the two-child benefit cap. It's now a policy of the Reform Party that you should, as a hard-working taxpayer, pay for the children of those who can't afford to pay for them themselves. I think it opens up a really good route for the Conservative Party, which has traditionally been much better on the economy, to gain a lot more credibility and tell the British public some hard truths that you can't just keep having spending increases on everything you want all the time, and things will eventually get worse if you try and do that.
Alice, I found myself, I think, disagreeing with Fraser when Fraser said that, on the whole, the public favours higher public spending. I wonder whether that is still true. I mean, a lot of the reactions that I've been hearing on the media to the supposed increase for the National Health Service have been quite negative, because people are beginning to take the view that money's going down a black hole. Where do you think the public stands on public spending? Is it something that is generally regarded as a good thing? Let's have more of it.
That's very interesting. I think that when it comes to institutions like the NHS, where there has been clear mismanagement, and those who actually experience the services provided by the NHS can attest to this, because they know about having to wait for hours to be seen. They know about all the missed appointments and the difficulties and the way it's just mismanaged terribly, essentially. So the idea that you can just pour money into an organisation which is structurally and fundamentally mismanaged is obviously not going to resonate well with taxpayers and voters. I think what people truly care about is autonomy, and I think if all of these public spending increases will come at the cost, which they will, of higher taxes, of national insurance hikes. I mean, Rachel Reeves already set out a plan to hike it by 40 billion in taxes. I think that's something that's going to make people very angry, because if things don't get better and taxes are getting higher, that is a red alarm, that is a red signal. So, frankly, that's what we're going to see, and that's what has been happening. And rightly, people are angry.
Thank you, panel. I think it is quite an interesting moment. That's Fraser Myers, James Price and Alice Grant, who will return at noon to answer the question, can terrorists be defined, or is it simply a violent person with whom we disagree? Before that, I'll ask how Ukraine's surprise drone attacks on Russian airfields changed the nature of warfare, and is Britain taking note? This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we are proud to stand for you, for the Britain you love, for the communities you live in. That's what makes us the fearless champions of Britain. Its voices and its values. Because we, at GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. On Wednesday, plumes of smoke rose from Russian airfields as the world witnessed the result of a Ukrainian plan that had been a year and a half in the making. The Operation Spider's Web sent 100 drones that struck deep into Russian territory, damaging and destroying dozens of strategic aircraft. Kiev is calling it a turning point. Moscow has responded strongly with attacks on Ukrainian civilians in Kharkiv. Has the drone changed the nature of warfare, and has Britain taken note? Joining me now is the former British Army spokesman, Major Michael Shearer. Michael, welcome to you. I put it to you that the drone has changed the nature of warfare. And it's not just these long-distance drone attacks on the Russian airfields. It's also what we're hearing from the battlefield. where at the front it is now almost impossible to use a vehicle because the vehicle will be taken out by a drone. It's very difficult to deploy forces forward because those forces will be taken out if they're spotted. So they're having to crawl their way in. They're having to spend long periods in the trenches before they're relieved. The drone has changed the nature of warfare. Discuss.
Well, it has, but that is not new. The battlefield has always been fluid. As soon as a new munition is procured, we immediately go and look for a defensive capability for that munition, and so it goes on. Just so happens right now, we have the drones that we can produce now very, very cheaply and are very effective on the battlefield. I mean, just a few days ago, when Ukraine sent 100-odd drones out with remarkable success, Russia has had a cold water shock with what occurred there. The Ukrainian security services have said that they've taken out about 34% of their bombing capability in flight. 40 or 41 aircraft, thereabout. And that is significant. Sadly, it doesn't make Ukraine any safer today because of that.
No, I understand that. And what I really want to talk about is not so much what the impact on that war, but the impact on warfare. Now, you say that we've known about drones for a long time, but I'm going to dispute that a bit. When the Russians began this invasion, there were columns of tanks. You remember they got stuck on the way to Kiev. No one would send a column of tanks today, just 3 years later, because those tanks would be picked off one by one. You were in a tank in Bosnia. Would you want to be in a tank today?
It's tricky business, right? And
tricky business.
The life of
it's suicidal.
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
No, you wouldn't.
No. Already, I know that there are protections against drones, and you know, the drive towards defeating them is maturing day by day.
Sure.
So I know that the UK, for example, I think are using radio waves, and I know that other countries are pursuing other manners of dealing with that. So it's recognised. I'm not saying the solutions are there right now, but that we're on catch up with that.
Right, and I wonder who you mean by we. Tell me how you think the United Kingdom defence philosophy is evolving during this period. I think I caught the government talking about 12 more submarines the other day. Do we need 12 more submarines or several thousand drones?
Oh, look, I think we need all of that. I mean, the reality that our government are saying we've got 2.3% of GDP spend at the minute, way too low. They're going to give us another 2% in 2 years. Too low, too slow. 0.2%, sorry. 0.2%. Yes, 0.2%. To bring that up to 2.5%, it's nowhere near enough. I know that in a week or two's time, when the NATO summit is in The Hague, that they're going to be asking for 3 immediately and 5 very shortly after that. We need to get serious about our defences.
I understand that. And I've been both Defence Secretary and Chief Secretary, and I'm going to speak to you as the Chief Secretary and say there's no reason to give Defence more money until it learns how to spend the money that it gets better. How is it that we are able to deploy so little when we're spending more than 2% of GDP and we have a very large GDP? Let's compare what we managed to achieve with what Ukraine, which I assume has a much smaller defence budget, what Israel manages to achieve. Israel is defeating 4 enemies simultaneously and protecting itself against attack. We don't have those capabilities.
Here's where I would put my finger on the problem. And you're absolutely right with all of that. Ukraine and Israel, they know they're living in an existential threat.
Yes.
Their people know this. And this concentrates the mind. The main effort of their governments is the defence of their country and their people.
Right.
The people of the United Kingdom have been held in a safe environment, fortunately, for decades, really. If you forgive the IRA and other incursions of terror.
But actually that bears out your point, because we became rather good at fighting terrorism.
Yes, we did.
Because that was the threat to us, and we got good at dealing with it, yes.
And I'm afraid now that the military, with government support and will, which is lacking at the minute, if the military get the political will and the political direction of where the threats lie, that hopefully our chiefs are telling the Prime Minister. That can change. But we also need a proper campaign to wake up the citizens of this country that we really are living in perilous times.
I think that's a good point, but I think we also need a sort of global open-mindedness. Now, let me give you an example. When the Trump administration came to office, there were figures in British industry who said, this is a sign that we need to be more self-sufficient in armaments. We must buy armaments only in Britain. I would say no, because those armaments turn out to be too expensive. Massive amounts of money are wasted. I think we should be looking at the countries that do face existential threat, Ukraine and Israel, find out how they do things, what equipment they're using, and, if necessary, buy much more broadly from countries that are involved in conflict.
I wouldn't argue with that, but I would say that we do need to re-industrialise in the United Kingdom. We are very good at building tanks, and so it can be as well as, not instead of. I think we can do both of those things. So we can learn lessons. We can buy off the shelf if it suits us, but we should also. We don't need to lose our manufacturing and the skill of armament and armour. We need to keep that going.
OK. I think if I were Defence Secretary, I would feel quite reluctant about ordering more tanks, by the way, having seen what's been going on in the Ukrainian field. What we're seeing now is we're seeing these drones which are very cheap, and we're seeing them being flown at no risk whatsoever to the drone pilot. The drone pilot is remote. It may well be the other day that these drones were being flown from thousands of kilometres away to destroy Russian aircraft. Do you think Britain has developed that sort of capability?
I don't know whether they've developed it. I'm absolutely certain that it will be concentrating the mind. And I know that they definitely are working on these radio frequencies to...
That's a countermeasure.
Yeah, as a countermeasure. That's what I would ask you to bear in mind. For every munition we have, there will always be a countermeasure, and it's always catch-up, always. And as soon as we know how to defeat it, then something else will come along. But it comes down to money again, and it comes down to political will. The money that's been offered out to defence at the minute is too low and too slow. They really need, if they want to be serious about the first order of what they always tell us of government is the protection of the realm and the people, then they need to get serious with that. And I appreciate that there are there's political competition for the spend, but it must be, look, it's more important right now than the NHS. It has to be. Because you either want your old people to die of natural causes, or you want your young people to die in a war.
A bold statement. And I'm not going to give you a chance to respond, but I just say on the subject of cost that I think some of the best weapons are some of the cheapest. Drones, for example. Thank you very much, Major Michael Shearer. Coming up, I'll speak to the author of a remarkable biography of a curious figure who tried to bring down Lenin and Trotsky, and yet is now largely forgotten. This is Sunday with Mike Portillo, only on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast on the Met Office. Well, after a wet day for some of us yesterday, today is offering something a little bit brighter, but still the risk of some showers. So yesterday's rain all moving off now towards the continent. That's allowing this area of high pressure to briefly build in, settling things down a little bit, but there will still be some showers around, chiefly across more northern and central parts. Some of these showers, again, still could be on the heavy side, but in between, we will see some spells of sunshine, and especially for us in the south, it will feel a little bit warmer than it did yesterday. We see highs reaching 19, possibly 20 degrees in the odd spot. So as we end out Sunday afternoon across the south, for many southern counties, we should remain fairly dry with some late spells of sunshine. But for East Anglia, the Midlands, Wales, continuation of some showers here. And a very similar story for Northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland. But even here, away from any showers, there will still be some late spells of sunshine as we see out the weekend. But do watch out for maybe a more persistent band of rain just arriving into the very far northwest of Scotland. Overnight, the showers becoming a little bit fewer and further between. That will allow more in the way of clearer skies to develop, so that could just allow some mist and fog to form as we go through the morning hours of Monday. But under the clear skies, it will be another fairly fresh night. Temperatures away from the towns and cities falling into mid-single figures. But I think most towns and cities probably holding up around 10 to 12 degrees. So a bright start for most of us on Monday morning. Plenty of sunshine, especially in the east, but thicker cloud moves in across Northern Ireland and Scotland as the morning goes on, and that's going to then bring in some rain as the day goes on. It's remaining largely dry and bright across the far south of the country, and it's here where we'll see the highest of the temperatures, could see temperatures reaching 21.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. That's State of the Nation every Monday and Tuesday at 8 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News. Diplomat, spy, conspirator, journalist and master of wartime propaganda, Sir Robert Bruce Lockhart was at the heart of some of the 20th century's most dramatic events, and yet he died almost forgotten. James Crustland has written his extraordinary biography entitled Rogue Agent, and James joins me now. Now, it's difficult to know where to begin with this chap, but he was a sort of career diplomat in Moscow, I think starting just before the First World War. So, conventional diplomat, learned to speak very good Russian, which I think was rather unusual, befriended all sorts of unusual people for a diplomat, got down into the workings of Russian society. But then, in 1918, is sent back personally by the Prime Minister, David Lloyd George, in a very different role. That's quite a long question. Do you want to take that apart?
Well, that's a good preface to where Lockhart's story really starts. So in January 1918, he is assigned the role of British agent, diplomat slash spy slash fixer, basically. And he's on the ground in Russia with the idea to keep Russia in the war in some way, shape or form, keeping in mind that Vladimir Lenin and Leon Trotsky, the new masters of Russia, want to extract Russia from the war. So he's really up against it to try and both bring the Bolsheviks around to still fighting the Germans whilst at the same time eventually conspiring against them to depose the Bolshevik regime and try to install a more friendly regime in power. So he has a lot on his hands, and it's worth noting he is barely 30 years old when he's got this weight on his shoulders.
I mean, the first remarkable thing is that he had made a relationship, quite a strong one, I think, with Trotsky, and knew Lenin as well, spoke very decent Russian.
Yep.
So I think that was quite unusual. I mean, you remark that one of the ambassadors he served just got by in French because he thought that, you know, Russian aristocrats still spoke French, so that was good enough. So he was remarkable in that way. How on earth do we get from the idea that he was an agent trying to keep these people in the war to the idea that he was trying to bring them down, which, by the way, would probably have meant killing Trotsky and Lenin? And was that a supervised operation, or had he gone rogue?
He had gone rogue. I mean, it's not just him. There's a mindset at play amongst Western diplomats and spies in Russia, particularly in Moscow, in the middle of 1918. You have French, American and British spies and diplomats there who are all thinking the same thing, which is that the Bolsheviks are going to stay out of the war. Once the war's over, this communism stuff is probably going to be a problem. And so the idea of regime change is actually, there's a sort of groupthink to which Lockhart is a hostage. And in particular, he's somewhat influenced by a quite notorious figure from intelligence history, the so-called ace of spies, Sidney Riley, who's an MI6 officer who's sent out to basically assess the situation. And between them, these conspirators, and that is what they become, hatched this plot, which did not have any kind of official sanction. It was very much developed in that atmosphere of the summer of 1918 in Russia to try and turn a elite detachment of the Red Army against Lenin and Trotsky.
Now, it may be that they were the victims of a sting. In other words, that they were set up, they were lured into this conspiracy with a view to being denounced. What do you think of that?
Well, that is part of it. I mean, the fact is that the contacts they make in the Red Army turn out to be agents of the Cheka, the Bolshevik secret police, the precursor to Putin's FSB today. There are elements of that involved in this, but I think it's two things. On the one hand, the plot is being manipulated by the Cheka. On the other hand, it does come out of this tradition that really begins as far back as really the start of 1918, to be honest, of British and French and American figures in Russia looking at the situation and thinking, well, these guys probably have to go.
Bruce Lockhart, big surprise this, being a Foreign Office official, is a drinker and a womanizer. Perhaps the most important woman in his life is called Mura. Who was she?
Mura Bubba is a fascinating figure. She herself was a spy, albeit of the amateur variety. She was a lover of great men, not just Lockhart, but H.G. Wells, was besotted with her. She is a constant throughout his life. They meet in Russia in 1918. She is on the periphery of this plot to bring down Lenin. I would say only on the periphery. I wouldn't say she's deeply involved, but she's there nonetheless.
Possibly she causes him to act unwisely because he's so besotted with her that he remains in Russia when it's probably unsafe to do so.
Oh, yeah. He is madly in love with her. And he does have several chances throughout 1918 to extract himself from what is becoming an increasingly dangerous situation, because the Cheka are onto him. But he believes two things. He believes, one, that he is a capable enough person to pull this off and somehow, alter the course of history and get the girl in the process.
Absolutely extraordinary. I mean, and by the way, he survives. I mean, it's a great puzzle to me how he wasn't simply liquidated when the plot was discovered. Should we just say something about him in the Second World War? He gets into propaganda, and he's quite good at that, isn't he?
He's very good at understanding the place that propaganda is going to have in modern warfare. When the Second World War starts, our propaganda is terrible. Particularly compared to what is being generated by Joseph Goebbels. What Lockhart does when he takes over the psychological warfare effort against Nazi Germany, when he's running this entity called the Political Warfare Executive, he understands that you need to integrate the war of words and the war for hearts and minds with military action. And in that sense, he sees where we are now and the fact that psychological warfare is just an integral part of any kind of conventional military operation. He's also very useful because he's, by this stage, an old Whitehall hand. He's able to smooth over ministerial concerns about this kind of underhanded warfare. He's best mates with Anthony Eden, with Brendan Bracken, with some really heavy hitters in Whitehall. And that helps to normalise propaganda in Britain's war effort.
We're coming to the end now. I'd like to invite you to use a series of adjectives to describe this extraordinary fellow. Well, some of them could be nouns as well. Let's start with liar.
Liar, truth teller as well. Candid in his memoirs about his flaws. He's a flawed man. He's charismatic. He's intelligent. He's creative. He's dynamic. He's troubled. He is all things, and that's why every day was a new adventure researching him.
Well, congratulations on your book. Do you want to hold it up one more time?
Sure.
It's by James Crossland. It's called Rogue Agent. Thank you very much indeed, James Crossland. Coming up, I'll speak to the British canoeist suspended from competing after launching an OnlyFans site to fund his Olympic dream. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast. High pressure is in charge for much of Europe over the next couple of days, bringing plenty of dry, warm and sunny weather. However, there will still be 1 or 2 showers around, particularly across parts of Madeira, the Canary Islands, as we go through Monday afternoon. But elsewhere, high pressure in charge, bringing dry, sunny and some really warm weather over the next couple of days. We could see temperatures into the high 20s, perhaps even into the low 30s across parts of Spain, Portugal and across parts of Italy too. But plenty of sunshine is on the cards.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Beth.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie's here.
I'm Michelle Dewberry. Britain's news channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection. Tune in to GB News, anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. He's a rising star in British canoeing, but now he's at the centre of a row that pits sport, funding and online content head-to-head. Courts Adams Rosenthal's competes in the individual canoe slalom and was suspended in April by the governing body Paddle UK following allegations about his posting on social media. He has more than 10,000 likes on OnlyFans and has posted 39 videos and over 100 photos on the website. Now he says he's being forced to choose between his Olympic dream and his OnlyFans account. He and his brother Klaas join me now. Hello.
Hello.
Very good to see you both. So, Kurz,
Yeah.
First of all, what exactly have you been banned from? Are you not allowed to compete, or is it that your funding has been withdrawn? What penalty have you paid so far?
Yeah, I actually, since the first BBC article, I had the team reach out to me and say, you got to be kind of careful about the details you're revealing. But I can tell you very clearly that on 4th of April, I got the call and I'm banned from attending PAL UK premises. contacting member of staff and athletes, and suspension. And for 2 months, they haven't done anything. They've left me completely in the dark. I don't know what to do, and hopefully, I mean, the media is really helping the case, so I appreciate everyone rallying behind this.
Did you courts have a clear understanding that by having an OnlyFans account, you were doing something which was against the rules? Was that clear to you?
No. I know what they've put me under. They've put me under 0.4.11. I know the policy very well, and it's negative behavior. Organizations do this all the time to keep it general, and then if they don't like something, then they're able to say that point of negative behavior. So
Okay.
I understand why they do it, but it's not what they're doing is just not good at all.
OK, so their policy, this is still to you courts, lists offensive use of social media and indecent, offensive or immoral behaviour as examples of gross misconduct that could result in an athlete being deselected. Have you been guilty of indecent, offensive or immoral behaviour, do you think?
No. I don't believe so. I am just an athlete that's trying to fund his Olympic dream, and I've been following the comments very closely. And this is not something that originally I started out as a passion. I've tried a lot of things to be able to fund the athletic dream, but all of them either dig into your training or just not. You're not able to do the long term. I hustle the Amazon warehouse. I've worked online, but none of those are as lucrative and as efficient as OnlyFans.
May I turn to your brother, Klaas? Klaas, I think you compete for Latvia. May I ask you, do you use OnlyFans? Do you have an OnlyFans account? Have you posted videos and photographs yourself?
Yes, I do. I actually started it first because of the fact that, for example, my brother, he was getting funded. I used to be on the GB program, well, on the team, and I did, I think, 1 year, and I raced for them, but I'm a little bit sketchy as to what I do. So I like to party, I like to have a good time, so sometimes I want to listen to their rules, and I thought, you know, it'd be good to go for Latvia instead, because I'm more free, I'm able to do what I want to do, but the biggest problem is the funding. So I initially started it because I needed money, pretty much. I've worked in a bar, I've done construction, and it's hard work, and yes, it's good for a little bit, but it's you're not able to do both. You're not able to do work as well as being an athlete. It's just not possible. Well, so, it is, but it's just way harder.
Klaas, are you being punished in Latvia because you have an OnlyFans account?
No, not a single bit of punishment. They understand they're not able to financially aid me enough. So therefore, I have control over my financial stability. For them to to restrict my brother from even being able to compete, not even take away his funding, is just ridiculous. Because realistically, the money they're given as athletes is not enough to live in London, where they're expected to move out to. It's nowhere near enough, and unless you have rich parents who are able to give you a place to stay, a good accommodation, buy you new equipment, then that's all good. Then you can live off that salary, and that's fine. But we're not able to do that because we're not from that same background.
Let me go back to Brother Courts, if I may. Courts, are you an isolated case? Are you aware of other people who are in your position?
I am aware of other athletes doing OnlyFans. I believe the divers did it, which is why I'm so surprised about the media coverage and why this story spread so much, because I'm not the first one to do it. I think Paddle UK have just punished me more than any other. The divers didn't get punished. There were people, other GB athletes in sports who didn't get punished. Organizations understood, the governing bodies understood. We're not able to fund your full career, and we're open-minded to you doing external things. Whereas Paddle UK, they want to give you this small chunk of money and then say, you know, work with that, and you're not allowed to have an opinion online. You're not allowed to show your personality. You're not allowed to do things to pursue things to fund yourself externally, which doesn't make any sense.
So, by comparison with the divers, you have described your content on OnlyFans as being edgy. Was your content, would you say, edgier than the divers? I mean, I'm asking you to be clear and frank with us. Can you think of a good reason why Paddle UK has reacted so strongly to what you have posted?
No, 100%. Here's my biggest guess. The GB divers, yes, they do OnlyFans, but it's very much what you can see on Instagram, just from different angles, right? It's a diver diving, but from a different angle, a closer up angle in his underwear or whatnot. Whatever I do, I want to do it to the best of my ability. So yes, I do OnlyFans the full way through. Whatever, I'm sure you know what OnlyFans is and what it entails. So I think that's where they've what they don't like.
I mean, I can add that they didn't really like neither one of us much from the start because we were always doing our own thing. We would say what we want to say, and we wouldn't listen to the program as much as some other athletes because we didn't have the same opportunities, and our mother was trying to give us every bit of expertise that we could get, like going off to Europe at young ages or going to competitions alone, because she just wasn't able to be there.
Yeah, they've never liked us from the beginning, and I think this was just something they could actually grab onto, and have a reason for the ban. Okay.
Well, obviously, I'd love to see you both being able to compete to the top of your ability. So let's hope that in one way or another this matter gets resolved. You're certainly getting a lot of publicity for this problem which you find yourselves. Thank you very much, Courts and Klaas.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Paddle UK has said in response that the Rosenthal's ban isn't disciplinary action, but an interim decision and a neutral act designed to protect all parties, as their athlete disciplinary policy lists offensive use of social media and indecent, offensive or immoral behaviour as examples of gross misconduct that could result in an athlete being deselected. The investigation has been referred to an independent investigation service, and they're committed to ensuring safe and open environments for all, where interim action is taken only when necessary and proportionate. Now, that concludes the first hour of Sunday with Michael Portillo. Coming up in the next hour, Vladimir Putin condemns Ukraine's drone strikes on Russian targets as acts of terrorism. I'll ask my panel whether definitions of terrorism are necessarily subjective. We'll discuss the rise of English, once spoken by only a small tribe of people in these islands, and now used extensively as the international language. Stefan Kyriazis will give me his theatre reviews, and we'll discuss foods that are claimed to be healthy. Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
A positive outlook through the night will power through to a bright day ahead. Boxed Home Battery Storage, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast on the Met Office. Well, after a wet day for some of us yesterday, today is offering something a little bit brighter, but still the risk of some showers. So yesterday's rain all moving off now towards the continent. That's allowing this area of high pressure to briefly build in, settling things down a little bit, but there will still be some showers around, chiefly across more northern and central parts. Some of these showers, again, still could be on the heavy side, but in between we will see some spells of sunshine, and especially for us in the south, it will feel a little bit warmer than it did yesterday. We see highs reaching 19, possibly 20 degrees in the odd spot. So as we end out Sunday afternoon across the south, for many southern counties we should remain fairly dry with some late spells of sunshine. But for East Anglia, the Midlands, Wales, continuation of some showers here. And a very similar story for Northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland. But even here, away from any showers, there will still be some late spells of sunshine as we see out the weekend. But do watch out for maybe a more persistent band of rain just arriving into the very far northwest of Scotland. Overnight, the showers becoming a little bit fewer and further between. That will allow more in the way of clearer skies to develop, so that could just Allow some mist and fog to form as we go through the morning hours of Monday. But under the clear skies, it will be another fairly fresh night. Temperatures away from the towns and cities falling into mid-single figures. But I think most towns and cities probably holding up around 10 to 12 degrees. So a bright start for most of us on Monday morning. Plenty of sunshine, especially in the east. But thicker cloud moves in across Northern Ireland and Scotland as the morning goes on. And that's going to then bring in some rain as the day goes on. It's remaining largely dry and bright across the far south of the country, and it's here where we'll see the highest of the temperatures, could see temperatures reaching 21.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
£54,321 in totally tax-free cash could make your year the best yet. How would you react if you got that winning call?
Oh my God, I'm going to cry. Oh my God, thank you.
You weren't expecting to get that call today, were you?
No, I wasn't.
For a chance to win £54,321 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. The poet James Russell Lowell once wrote, "And what is so rare as a day in June? Then, if ever, come perfect days." Well, alas, I experienced torrential rain last night, but I welcome you warmly to another hour of current affairs, theatre, literature, and food. While many of us have cheered Ukraine's audacious destruction of Russian bombers far from the front line with drones, President Putin calls those incursions terrorist attacks. Can terrorists be defined? My panel will opine. Once the speech for a few 100,000, now the voice of billions. How did English take over the world? Sir Rupert Gavin will be here to discuss the story of the language's remarkable ascent. Stefan Kyriazis will join me with his review of the latest theatre offerings, and I'll be discussing the truths and the myths of healthy eating. First, your news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. At 2 minutes past midday, the top story this hour, the UK has pledged a fulsome response to security concerns after reports the United States warned against allowing a Chinese embassy to be built near London's financial district. The Technology Secretary, Peter Kyle, said any issues would be handled through the planning process. But Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp has called the proposal a security risk, warning it could serve as a hub for Chinese espionage near critical data infrastructure. He says the embassy should not be approved, echoing concerns reportedly raised by the White House. More than 60,000 NHS appointments were cancelled during just 5 days of strike action last summer, including many for cancer patients. Figures seen exclusively by GB News reveal that more than 63,000 procedures were scrapped during the walkouts in July 2024, including vital biopsies, blood tests and X-rays. The Health Secretary is now urging doctors to reconsider further strike plans, warning the disruption risks delaying life-saving diagnoses. NHS leaders, though, say the impact on patients has been devastating. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch says employers should have the right to ban staff from wearing burqas and other face coverings in the workplace. Speaking to the Sunday Telegraph, she says she wouldn't allow veiled visitors into her constituency surgeries and believes staff should dress by choice, not community or family pressure. UK law allows dress codes but requires any restriction on religious clothing to be proportionate and for a legitimate reason. Her comments are likely to spark fresh debate on religious freedom and workplace rights. The government has announced an £86 billion science and tech investment plan ahead of this week's spending review, funding breakthroughs in drug research, battery tech and microchip design. Chancellor Rachel Reeves says the package will boost jobs and national security with £500 million ring-fenced for local-led innovation. Critics warn inflation, higher visa costs and education shortfalls could undermine the ambition. Reeves has admitted tough choices lie ahead, though, saying not every department will get what they want. In the US, the fallout between Donald Trump and Elon Musk is now fueling fears over deep cuts to NASA's science program, with 40 missions now at risk. The White House is proposing slashing NASA's budget by nearly a quarter, with critics warning it could be the agency's worst crisis in a decade, or in decades. Trump has threatened to withdraw contracts with Musk's SpaceX, which NASA relies on to reach the Moon and even Mars. Space experts say vital climate and planetary missions could be scrapped and warn the space program is being repurposed for flags, not science. And Sir David Attenborough has urged urgent action to save the world's oceans and told Prince William, "We must act before we destroy this great treasure."
The thing which I am appalled by when I first saw the shots that were taken for this film are what we have done to the deep ocean floor.
Well, the pair were speaking after a private screening of Ocean, a new and powerful documentary narrated by Sir David, exposing the damage from overfishing and deep-sea trawling. Prince William, who calls Attenborough his inspiration, will address world leaders at a marine summit in Monaco and urge urgent and optimistic action. The film Ocean supports protecting 30% of marine areas by 2030, a goal that both men say could help the oceans recover. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you for another look at the top stories in around half an hour. Now, though, let's get back to Michael.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Ukraine managed to destroy Russian strategic bomber aircraft with drones that emerged from lorries and were piloted remotely, maybe from thousands of kilometres away. President Putin calls that terrorism. Hitler might have called the French resistance terrorists. Some Irish people might have called those who tried to murder Margaret Thatcher freedom fighters. The BBC doggedly refuses to call Hamas killers terrorists. So what is terrorism? Is it entirely subjective? Merely violence of which we disapprove? Joining me again now is my panel, the Deputy Editor of Spiked Online, Fraser Myers, former political advisor James Price, and political commentator Alice Grant. Panel, I don't envy you this question. I think it's extremely difficult. I'm very glad to be asking you the questions. Alice, can you define terrorism?
Gosh, it's like being back at university.
It is.
I would say that there is an element of subjectivity in the way it's used. However, according to international law, terrorism is, I think, even though there's no universal definition, it is partly defined as an act of violence or the threat of violence by a party in order to either coerce a government and often inflicted on civilians of a particular nation. So in this case, I don't think it would be right to describe and characterise the Ukrainian spiderweb operation as terrorism, because this was within the context of a war, and obviously it was intended as perhaps an element there of self-defence, considering that these strategic bombers were being essentially put in place in order to eventually invade and attack Ukraine.
So you put store by the existence of sovereign nations, recognised governments, and therefore things that are done by recognised governments, on the whole, we regard as not being terrorism, but things that are done by non-state actors, we're more likely to regard as terrorism. Would that be a way of summarising your position?
Yes, I think that there is the question of legitimacy inherently provoked by terrorism, because those very acts aren't necessarily usually carried out by parties who don't or who lack that legitimacy, and therefore are turning to violent means and means which are not within the law in order to try to get their point across and I guess coerce governments or populations.
And by the way, does it matter very much? I mean, we argue about it a great deal, but does it very much matter if my terrorist is someone else's freedom fighter?
I think it does matter, and I think that all acts of violence, I mean, like Maggie Thatcher said, that we should never cave into that sort of behaviour, because it sets such a dangerous precedent as to ways to achieve political power. If you're using violent, unauthorised, illegal means in order to achieve political aims, that's very worrying, because I believe that any political aims can and should be achieved, firstly through diplomacy, through persuasive communication, essentially through democratic means. So the use of violence should never be seen as okay. In terms of obviously the context of war, and in particular with Russia and Ukraine, I think this is a very complicated situation. And again, I think the spiderweb operation just really throws a light on how little I think the West and Europe actually have a true grasp and understanding of this difficult conflict, which has been now going on for years, and yet there doesn't seem to be any clear resolution upcoming.
James, would your definition of terrorism be very different from Alice's?
Well, I think that the crucial bit here is, and Alice mentioned, about legitimacy, which is a kind of tricky concept. Obviously, we have the letter of the law and things, but you can find that various laws, for whatever reason, are illegitimate. And if you want to use a couple of definitions here, it was Karl von Clausewitz who said that war was the continuation of politics by other means. And someone like Max Weber would, the classic definition of a state is somebody that has the legitimate monopoly on the use of violence. And I think throughout history, and we're going to see a lot more of this coming back again, are challenges to the legitimacy of a given state. That's obviously what Putin has tried to do, to say that there's no legitimate reason for Ukraine to exist. But we're seeing it, I think, on the domestic level here in the West as well. So last night, Trump had to send the National Guard into Los Angeles because various people thought that the deportations that were happening were illegitimate, and they thought that it was wrong to try and send back illegal immigrants, which to me is crackers, but there we are. And you've got something like here in London, the ULEZ expansion, which are these cameras that clock you and whether your car is environmentally friendly or not, and people have been going around and blowing up and destroying the cameras that have been trying to record those things. And that, to me, looks like a sort of a tax on the legitimacy of the state. And then on the other side, of course, you've got the nearly 50,000 people that MI5 say are on the Islamist terrorist watch list. And those are also people, again, who don't really see the legitimacy of the state as is currently constituted and will use violence as well. I think it's therefore very dangerous to have a state stuck, whether it's Britain now or anything else, where you've got actors on both sides starting to question legitimacy, whether it's because the state's not providing what it should do, based on what you think, or deeper ideological differences and problems that we've got. Then you add the drones onto it, of course, and everybody can become a terrorist very, very easily, and we've got no defence against any of that.
Legitimacy, it's easy to ascribe legitimacy to regimes which subject themselves to elections. But those that don't subject themselves to elections, we might regard as illegitimate. Does that mean that, therefore, people fighting against those regimes we should not regard as terrorists? This comes up against our official policy of recognising countries. I mean, we recognise, I'm still with James here, recognise many countries which are not legitimate in that sense. They don't have democratic legitimacy, but we recognise them nonetheless. So would that mean that an organisation that fought against the government that we recognise would be a terrorist organisation?
It's a very good question. As you say, I think we go back to kind of John Locke's idea that is consent of the people that gives a state its legitimacy, and China obviously has a different take on that. Russia, of course, would try and pretend that it was also getting consent, because it would try and pretend that the elections that Vladimir Putin were having were definitely not influenced in any way, shape or form. So I think, as you say, it's deeper than just Locke's idea of elections being what gives legitimacy. I think that you need to have the idea of tradition being part of this as well. I think of consent being part of it as well, and the ability to actually have the power to get things done. You've got Thomas Hobbes talking about a state needing to provide things for people, which the Chinese Communist Party has managed to do. And so I think it's very, very difficult when we start having people, even in the West, challenging the legitimacy of, say, elected leaders and things like the ECHR and things like that. I wouldn't go so far as to say that the ECHR, the court in Strasbourg, was a terrorist organisation yet for undermining democratically elected people here in Britain. But you can see the kind of slippery slope when we start getting into this territory. And I think it's very, very, very concerning that we've got so many, maybe almost fifth columnists, who don't believe in our kinds of legitimacy here in Britain.
Fraser, how do you view this?
Well, I think the thing we're missing at the moment is the word terror. Is the purpose to incite terror in the population? So it is absurd, for instance, for the BBC to say that Hamas are not terrorists, because the purpose of October 7th was not simply to kill and maim as many people as possible, which is obviously what they did, but also to make everyone else who wasn't killed feel uneasy, unsettled. And I think that's really important to keep hold of. It's not all acts of violence, even mass murders, are necessarily terroristic in nature. I think we do have a problem where the definition has become very promiscuous. Obviously, Vladimir Putin calling the Ukrainian assault terroristic is entirely cynical. But even in the UK, we're guilty of essentially using the word terrorism to dismiss a whole load of things that we don't like, things that are not necessarily going to lead to violence. This weekend, it came out that the PREVENT programme is looking into people who might oppose mass migration.
Or be anxious about it, indeed.
Or be anxious about it. And indeed, you know, viewers of your excellent BBC documentaries apparently is cause for concern for the people at PREVENT. They think that's a sign of radicalisation. So clearly, or for instance, even the terror laws are being used in a way that is unhelpful, bad for free speech. If you take, for instance, the band Kneecap, one of them has been charged for essentially a speech crime. That's a problem, and it means that basically it's twofold. One, it's bad for free speech, but also it means we're missing where the terrorism really is. And as James said, it's Islamist extremism is the real terror threat in the UK. Since 2005, 95 people have been killed by Islamist extremists, 3 by the far right. And yet we are, by expanding this definition of terrorism to cover just about anything that might be objectionable to someone in Whitehall, we are missing the real threat, and that is going to cost lives.
Fraser, the population of Gaza must be pretty terrorised by the mass bombing that they've endured. Well, the massive amount of bombing that they've endured. Does that mean that Israel is guilty of terrorist acts?
I don't think so, because the aim, I think intent is important. The aim of the Israeli operation is not to terrorise the people of Gaza, it's to eradicate Hamas. And you can have criticisms about the way they've gone about that, criticisms of the effects on civilians, but that is ultimately not the purpose of their mission.
So, Alice, do we conclude that it isn't just a matter of subjectivity, it isn't just what you and I think, that there are real points that we can grasp onto, that there are matters of legitimacy, for example, which really still count in this definition?
One thing I would say is that whilst intention of the parties committing the acts obviously does play an important role, I don't think that should be viewed entirely as how to define whether an act is an act of terrorism, whether it has a legitimate basis. I think the consequence of that act should be looked at more carefully, especially in regards of war and where those lines and those boundaries perhaps become a little bit more blurred, because obviously in times of war there will be acts committed which are directly against the population and less so the government of the nation. And I think that's so key in this debate about terrorism that we've been talking about, is that the whole point of an act of terrorism is, as was rightly said, is perpetrated against the population, against civilians, against people who don't have the means to defend themselves. And we see that as well in our countries when acts of terrorism are committed by certain extremist groups, such as Islamist fundamentalists. And they're not targeting the government, they're targeting the people of this nation. And that's what makes it so appalling, and that's what makes it so important that we stand up against that. So in questions, whether it's in Ukraine or in Russia or in Gaza, when acts are committed against the population of people, that is when the line is really entirely, I think, crossed. And yeah, and when innocent people suffer, often because of illegitimate parties, that is when I think terrorism should and can be applied.
Thank you, panel. A very tricky subject, and worth just noting that the Ukrainian action described as terrorism was against strategic aircraft, and the response by the Russians has been against civilians in Kharkiv.
Indeed.
So many thanks to Fraser Myers from Spiked Online, James Price, political commentator, Alice Grant, also a political commentator. Now, coming up, he's braved the stalls, survived the intervals and endured the dramatic pauses. I'm talking of Stefan Kyriazis, who will join me with his scene-stealing take on this week's theatre offerings. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Welcome to Dunkirk. Yes, this was was described as our darkest hour. And of course, it was British expeditionary forces that had to get lifted off the beaches. And the real problem was that the big naval ships couldn't get in close enough. So these little small boats that you see, 933 of them, were called up, and they managed to evacuate most of the troops out of there over that week period. And unfortunately, out of those 933 small boats, unfortunately only 697 of them returned. The majority of those that were wrecked at that stage were under enemy fire. And every big anniversary, these small ships return to Dunkirk to educate, to remember, and then to sail back to Britain. And there has been so much interest here in Dunkirk and these small ships.
How important is it that we remember Dunkirk?
Incredibly important. 85 years ago, there were 250,000 troops on the beach up there, another 25,000 in the rear guard. None of them knowing whether they were going to live or die, or whether they were going to be rescued, or even if they could be rescued. And based upon what's happening today, we need to remember what happened then, and commemorate that and celebrate the fact that we still are aware of it, and these boats exist as well. So it's just so important to us.
Lots of these little boats back in the day were only brand new,
Yes.
and the Admiralty just took them away and used them.
Yeah.
And the men that were on them didn't necessarily own them, and there was quite a few of them destroyed.
There were 240 of them destroyed over that whole period.
GB News, the People's Channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. From polite applause to standing ovations, Stefan Kyriazis has been on the theatre trail all week, and he now joins me to tell me what's worth a ticket. Where shall we start?
Well, firstly, let me say being with you is a dream, Michael. And on that note, we're going to Midsummer Night's Dream, which is a revival from the 2019 performance at the Bridge Theatre. It's a kind of immersive, incredibly fun show. We've got a tiny little clip that just more gives you a sort of sense of the atmosphere and the energy of it all.
You generally have a very good evening at the Bridge Theatre, don't you?
Very, very. I mean, generally, yes. But this one, I mean, it's almost a bit Cirque du Soleil. So you have aerialists. They're basically the fairies once we get into the sort of magical woodland area. But it's also what they do at the Bridge. We'll get to their bath. But what they do there is it's very, very immersive. And in fact, the guy playing Theseus, the Duke of Athens, even goes, "Oh, it's immersive" at one stage during the play. So it's having a lot of fun. It knows what it's doing. And it's this brilliant thing at the Bridge. They love getting the audience on the floor. Yeah. So you saw there, it's filled and they're sort of ushered around the whole time. Stages come up and down, beds and forest bowers are on wheels and move amongst them. Aerialists are up there, or they're wrapped in silks and ropes, and then they come down on top of other characters that are acting. You've got a bit of Beyonce, a bit of Dizzy Rascal, basically the story of the fairy, king and queen, Titania and Oberon, running amok. Magic flowers in people's eyes, so they fall in love with the first person they see. And it really, really, really leans into the fun. So there is a little bit of criticism that, you know, it talks of if we shadows do offend. There's a shadowy, darker side to Midsummer Night's Dream. It's kind of there, but this is basically a romp. The fun is extraordinary. The two you saw in the bath there.
The bath scene, yeah.
Yeah, the bath scene there. So that's basically Oberon has been doused with the flower. So when he wakes up, he falls in love with Bottom, who has been transformed into an ass. And Bottom is a terrible wannabe actor, very, very sort of loud and proud.
Oberon falls in love with Bottom.
Yes. So Oberon wakes up and his wife wants him to fall in love with a beast as a kind of revenge on him, and Bottom has been turned into a donkey or an ass, so it's got the ears, and Oberon suddenly thinks this monstrous creature is the true love of his life, and it's hilarious. And they're in the bath, Beyonce's playing, they're toasting champagne and bubbles, there's a sort of bed scene-ish where they're wheeled around the audience, and the entire audience is holding hands in this big circle, and it's like a dance production, and they just do this around the floor, and I prefer sitting and watching, but it looks like extraordinary fun down there. I haven't laughed that much for a very, very long time. And then at the very end, there's a play within a play, which again is actually sort of hinting at darker themes. Here, it was just hysterical. And like all best Shakespeare, they play with the audience. 430-odd years later, still relevant, still engaging. They get someone's mobile phone at one stage and sort of, I beseech you, unlock your calendar, and then they take a self-portrait with that person's phone. They play, I love when you just add in a bit of modern slang, so it's got, God, you're hot, and stuff like that. And the audience laughs and recognises, but we're still listening to Shakespeare's language. It works incredibly well. It's on at the Bridge Theatre until August the 20th. I cannot recommend it enough. Good. Gigantic fun.
I'm going to have to hurry you forward.
Yes. Fiddler on the Roof. A return last year, Regent's Park Open Air Theatre. We've got a tiny, tiny clip of that, and it's transferred to the Barbican. And we can take a little look.
Tradition! 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 Tradition!
Wonderful entertainment. How well has it made the transfer?
It transfers very, very well. I mean, there you've got a gigantic stage. You had wheat fields around the stage curled up, and then you had the backdrop of Regent's Park, which is phenomenal. You don't have that here, so it took me, with the memory, about 10, 15 minutes to get into it. It is a stage production, so they've got just boxes of wheat sheafs, but still, it opens, and a wheat field is rising in front of us with the fiddler on top, which doesn't happen at Regent's Park, and then the villagers all huddled underneath, which is, again, very symbolic of rooted in the land, but also oppression. It's beautifully, beautifully done. Actually, when a lot of the lights go down for the candlelit wedding or something like that, it was exquisite. Jerry Bock's music is incredible. You've got tradition, sunrise, sunset, If I Were a Rich Man, all these incredibly to life. Incredible score, beautiful story. Most of the cast have returned. The dancing, originally Jerome Robham's choreography and then updated a bit. The dancing is phenomenal. The movement throughout is phenomenal. The cast are great. I'm sort of okay-ish with the leads of Tevye and Golda, the husband and wife. But all in all, it's a fantastic, fantastic show, and I recommend it highly. And you don't have to worry about the rain.
And you can now tell us about Quadrophenia.
Tiny little bit. Again, one last little clip so I don't have to talk, so we get a clue of this as well.
The music of Pete Townsend.
Got a little glimpse of him there, looking mean and moody. Basically, it's his 1973 album, seminal, ground-changing album. Then it was made into a film in 1979. It's set in 1964, mods and rockers, a sort of disaffected youth Jimmy, who's one of the mods, living in London, unhappy and frustrated with his life, so he finds meaning in sort of the gangs, the two different opposing forces. They all go for a jolly weekend down to the coast, clash with the rockers. It's all about finding your way in life. It's a ballet, so it's mainly through dance. The music has been orchestrated and embellished and enlarged. It's only just opened in Plymouth as a world premiere before it's going on tour. So at the moment, the early word, I saw things like sensational, epic, things like this. Early word is really, really good. It goes to Edinburgh next week, then Southampton, coming to Sadler's Wells for about 3 weeks at the end of June, and then it wraps up in Salford. I am really, really looking forward to that. We had AC/DC Ballet recently with the English National Ballet, which was thrilling. And again, brings in totally different audiences, like the same as the Peaky Blinders dance show by Rambo. And I love this. I love that different people are going to see things brought in by The Who, but then enjoying an art form they might not necessarily have gone to and realising it's accessible and it's entertaining.
I went to the ballet yesterday. I went to see Onegin at the Royal Ballet.
My favourite.
Well, funnily enough, a member of the public came up to me and said, I'm here because Stefan recommended it. Can you imagine?
I don't believe
That's exactly what happened.
It is my favourite ballet.
It is absolutely wonderful, isn't it? It's incredibly.
It makes me cry every time from emotion, not just the devastation of the ending. But
and I think there's still a performance or two to go.
Yeah, it's glorious.
Then yesterday evening I was at Flying Dutchman in Holland Park. Yep. I mentioned that because there are also 2 or 3 performances of that to go. Quite amazing that Holland Park has dared to put on Wagner, which is, really a very demanding production. It's got a huge cast. It's extremely well done. I had a wonderful evening. And I'm off to Holland Park now to see Itch.
This one I don't know.
Jonathan Dove. It's a Jonathan Dove opera, so it's modern stuff. Revival from about 3 years ago.
OK.
I know very little about it. I'm very prepared to be surprised.
All right. Well, you know how I feel about all the shrieking, but you can tell me about it next week.
I will tell you.
Broaden my mind.
Thank you very much indeed, Stefan. Up next, how did a once obscure dialect grow into the global language that we know today? I'll be finding out about how English conquered the world.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast on the Met Office. Well, after a wet day for some of us yesterday, today is offering something a little bit brighter, but still the risk of some showers. So yesterday's rain all moving off now towards the continent. That's allowing this area of high pressure to briefly build in, settling things down a little bit, but there will still be some showers around, chiefly across more northern and central parts. Some of these showers, again, still could be on the heavy side, but in between, we will see some spells of sunshine, and especially for us in the south, it will feel a little bit warmer than it did yesterday. We see highs reaching 19, possibly 20 degrees in the odd spot. So as we end out Sunday afternoon across the south, for many southern counties we should remain fairly dry with some late spells of sunshine. But for East Anglia, the Midlands, Wales, continuation of some showers here. And a very similar story for Northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland. But even here, away from any showers, there will still be some late spells of sunshine as we see out the weekend. But do watch out for maybe a more persistent band of rain just arriving into the very far northwest of Scotland. Overnight, the showers becoming a little bit fewer and further between. That will allow more in the way of clearer skies to develop, so that could just allow some mist and fog to form as we go through the morning hours of Monday. But under the clear skies, it will be another fairly fresh night. Temperatures away from the towns and cities falling into mid-single figures. But I think most towns and cities probably holding up around 10 to 12 degrees. So a bright start for most of us on Monday morning. Plenty of sunshine, especially in the east. But thicker cloud moves in across Northern Ireland and Scotland as the morning goes on. And that's going to then bring in some rain as the day goes on. It's remaining largely dry and bright across the far south of the country. And it's here where we'll see the highest of the temperatures. Could see temperatures reaching 21.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just after 12:30. Let's bring you up to date with the top stories before I hand you back to Michael. We'll start with news on the Chinese embassy plans in London. The UK pledging a fulsome response to security concerns after reports the United States warned against allowing that Chinese embassy to be built near the city's financial district. Technology Secretary Peter Kyle said any issues would be handled through the planning process. But Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp has called the proposal a security risk and warned it could serve as a hub for Chinese espionage. He says the embassy should not be approved, echoing concerns reportedly raised by the White House. More than 60,000 NHS appointments were cancelled during just 5 days of strike action last summer, including many for cancer patients. Figures seen exclusively by GB News reveal that more than 63,000 procedures were scrapped during the July 2024 walkout, including vital biopsies, blood tests and X-rays. The Health Secretary is now urging doctors to reconsider further strike plans, warning the disruption risks delaying life-saving diagnoses. NHS leaders say the impact on patients has been devastating. The government has announced an £86 billion science and tech investment plan ahead of Wednesday's spending review, funding breakthroughs in drug research, battery tech and microchip design. The Chancellor says the package will boost jobs and national security, with £500 million ring-fenced for local-led innovation across the UK. Critics, though, warn inflation, high visa costs and education shortfalls could undermine the ambition. Rachel Reeves has admitted tough choices lie ahead, saying not every department will get what they want. And just before I hand you back to Michael, the fallout in the United States between Donald Trump and Elon Musk is fueling fears over deep cuts for NASA's science program. 40 missions are now at risk. The White House is proposing slashing NASA's budget by nearly a quarter, with critics warning it could be the agency's worst crisis in decades. Trump has threatened to withdraw contracts with Musk's SpaceX, which NASA relies on to reach the moon and even Mars. Space experts say vital climate and planetary missions could be scrapped and warn the space program is being repurposed for flags, they say, not science. Those are the latest headlines. A full roundup with your lunchtime news at 1. Now, though, it's over to Michael.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. English was once spoken only by a scattered few in muddy fields, but it's now understood by 1.5 billion people across the world. How has it become the language of the globe? In his new book, Amorous or Loving, Rupert Gavin outlines the story. Sir Gavin has also produced or co-produced over 300 shows in the West End and is presently the chairman of the English National Ballet, and he joins me now. Very good to see you, indeed. You've written a whole book about this, so this question is rather unfair. But what were the factors that led English to becoming a global language?
The weather.
The weather is one. Why?
The soil, the geography. Well, go back to, in your intro, you mentioned there was a time when only a few people, about 200, in 878, only about 200,000 people in this country spoke the dialect West Saxon down in the West Country, and they were close to being eradicated, and we might have lost the primacy of this particular language. They were under pressure from the Vikings. But an extraordinary battle happened in 878. Not often studied, Battle of Edington, in Ethandune, as it was then called, and King Alfred actually so defeated the Vikings that a treaty was formed, Treaty of Wedmore, not often taught, but that divided our country up into Danelaw and what became Anglo-Saxon territory. And it was that formed the basis of Anglish, as Alfred called the language, and Angloland, which Alfred called the country, even though, bizarrely, the Angles weren't part of it. So they were still part of Danelaw. So that's one of those sort of quirks. And what happened then, over the next few centuries, was the impact of the various invasions, and those were driven by the fertility of our soil. It was perfect climate to produce agricultural plenty. But because of our geography, you had to be a pretty determined invader to succeed. Many failed. Hitler failed. Napoleon failed. The Spanish Armada failed. But 4 succeeded. The Romans, the Anglo-Saxons, the Normans, and of course, the Vikings. And it's the infusion of all those that created this extraordinarily rich language. But
why should it be a successful language?
Because the contact between those various invading powers, and they didn't just maraud through like hordes in Europe did. You know, once you're here, you tended to stay. And what happened was the language gradually got simplified and simplified, primarily between the interaction between the Vikings and the Saxons. They had to trade across a long, long line for about 200 years.
And you think that's important, the lack of declensions and conjugations?
Gender.
And gender.
We are the only major Western tongue that doesn't have bizarre genders you have to learn. We don't have ridiculous suffixes. You say, I love, you love, they love. You know, it is relatively simple.
Probably a good moment to bring us to the title of the book, because your book is called Amorous or Loving, which on the face of it doesn't seem to have anything to do with the subject.
Has
it does.
Everything to do with the subject, Michael, because we have one of the richest languages now in the world, 500,000 words in the OED. By comparison, the French triumphantly introduced the 9th edition of their dictionary of the language, the Académie Française Dictionnaire, with, last November, 53,000 words. They took 40 years to expand from 35,000 to 53,000. Including such wonderfully French words like le wokism.
I mean, amorous or loving is drawing our attention to the fact that we have Latin and Anglo-Saxon origins to our words, but that still doesn't account for why we have, I think we've just said 10 times as many as the French.
In their official. You know, if you go to the Larousse dictionary, it's 200. But it's still a huge, huge gap because we're an absorptive language. We don't have a constitution, just as we don't have a political constitution, we don't have a language constitution, unlike other...
We don't have an Académie
Anglaise. There have been Jonathan Swift was remarkably keen on establishing one and wrote to the prime ministers of the day regularly saying that this was a heinous crime. But the temperament, the Anglo-Saxon temperament, and that's fundamentally who we are. And remember, out of the 100 words that we use most often, 91 of them are Old English Saxon. You know, that is the core of our language. It's the core of our spirit. But
you talk about Chaucer and Shakespeare and Dickens,
yes,
and many others, and of course that does explain why the language spread. But I suppose a critic of your book might say, no, the real reason that English has this universality is that we bequeathed it to the Americans, and the Americans have been the important nation, particularly in the 20th century. That's why English is universal.
It is one of the fundamental reasons, as my book explains. The start point of the story is 878, when Arthur defeated Alfred. The high point is 1783, the Treaty of Paris. And it was Shelburne, who was Prime Minister, not often thought about these days, who was the genius of that, because his genius said, we are going to be, in our treaty, so generous that this nation of ex-colonials, rather than being enemies of their previous masters, they're going to be the best friends. So he did this deal, which was far more generous than America's allies, the French and the Spanish, wanted. They were upset at how generous Shelburne was. The king was so upset, Shelburne had to immediately resign, but the deal was done. And at that stage, there were so many options. America could have spoken German. There was a very strong lobby in America to evolve their English into a different form. There were some commentators who said in 50 years' time, American English will be as different from English as Portuguese from Spanish.
No,
you could possibly say there obviously are differences. So that was an act of genius.
Let me ask you one other question. How is it that the English language was so successful in the theatre, but not in opera? You can scarcely name an English opera between Purcell and Britain.
It's the significance of the lyric and the lyric line. And for drama, be it Shakespeare, Webster, you know, all of our great playwrights, they use this remarkably rich and rhythmic language. That was the Celtic influence, in my view, that the Celts brought. Within opera, I'm afraid to say, and maybe I'm partial, the lyric line is not actually the dominating thought. And one of my key analyses was the English have not been strong at music globally, other than in three particular occasions. One was in the 17th and 18th century, writing hymns, then in contemporary music since '64, and then in the musical since 1970. And in every case, we have produced globally resonant music, and in every case, the lyric or the poetry and the language is fundamentally important.
I rather hoped to catch you out with that last question, but I certainly did not. That was an absolutely fascinating answer. So, Amorous or Loving by Rupert Gavin, a jolly good read. Thank you very much for joining me today. Coming up, wellness chef Sandy Varar joins me to bust some myths in the kitchen, revealing the so-called healthy meals that might not be so wholesome after all. Stay with me. Thank you.
Be nice to escape the grey.
Clear skies, here we come.
As clear as our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
High pressure is in charge for much of Europe over the next couple of days, bringing plenty of dry, warm and sunny weather. However, there will still be one or two showers around, particularly across parts of Madeira, the Canary Islands, as we go through Monday afternoon. But elsewhere, high pressure in charge, bringing dry, sunny and some really warm weather over the next couple of days. We could see temperatures into the high 20s, perhaps even into the low 30s across parts of Spain, Portugal and across parts of Italy too. But plenty of sunshine is on the cards.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Well, we're talking about holidays now and how not to pay too much for them. Because I think the thing is, a lot of people are saying, oh, we're going to go on holidays, and then they look and they say, really, can we afford it?
Yeah.
And if people pushed the boat out last year, they're maybe finding that this year they just can't do it because it definitely is more expensive. Hayley Sparks joins us in the studio now to tell us the tricks of the trade. And you feel, Hayley, that all is not lost. You think if you shop around, you apply a few tricks, you can do OK for yourself?
Yeah, I definitely love to share some of my tips with the viewers because everybody deserves a holiday, but with the cost of living, we want to kind of see where we can save money. So one of my biggest tips would be to use a travel consultant. They work for you for free, so there's no cost to the consumer. But what I didn't realise till I joined the travel industry is about 60% of the world's holidays are trade only, so you wouldn't find them online. So if you work with a professional, they can help do all the research for you. So some of the hotspots at the moment, Poland, for example, is one of the most affordable European destinations. Other really up-and-coming destinations, you've got places like Albania, Bulgaria, great alternatives to Greece. You've only got to have a look online at the stunning coastlines. And another top tip to consider is a cruise. Now, people often think, wow, cruises, you think luxury, you think, you know, sort of bucket list, but that is not the case. The cruise market is so extensive. So there's great budget entry-level cruise lines, which are fantastic for families. You know what you're paying for. There's no hidden charges. And different brands like MSC, for example, they'll do single parent discounts.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What is the state of our economy? What is the state of our National Health Service? What is the state of our schools?
What on earth is going on?
Understanding Britain means understanding the state we are in. This is State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays from 8 p.m. on GB News.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. This week marks Healthy Eating Week, a time to check on our habits and feel good about what's on our plates. But how wholesome is your supposedly healthy diet? Health coach and wellness chef Sandy Varrar joins me in the studio to help bust some of the myths. Hello, Sandy. Very good to see you.
Very good to see you, sir.
So I mean, tell me, what are the myths? When do you see instances of food being presented as though it were healthy that you think is not?
It's usually around these energy drinks. That's probably the biggest one at the moment I can highlight straight away, these energy drinks that so-called give you energy. And it doesn't. It just fills you full of sugar. There are some sugar-free drinks, but when you look at them closely, they're not actually sugar-free. They're using a different kind of sugar, but the body doesn't know any different. It's still sugar. So the soft drink you have in front of you there is branded as a sugar-free diet. Is fantastic.
A sugar-free cola?
Now, it will taste, you'll enjoy it, it'll be nice. But
it tastes pretty good, yeah.
But the thing is, I'd rather you, if you were going to participate in having a soda, to make the choice, it'd be best that you have, as they call it, the full-fat Coca-Cola, because that is proper, ordinary sugar. It's not the man-made kind of sugars that we have. And it's reported, if people check it out and go on the internet and look at what the myths and failures that are with soft drinks, they'll see that diet sodas are not as healthy as people realise.
Now, as I scoff my way through the food in front of me, I think we should explain why I'm eating and you're not. Why are you not eating?
Well, every few months I do a fast, and I'm currently fasting at the moment. I am cleansing my body, and I'm on a water fast, and I stopped eating on Wednesday at 7 o'clock. That was my last meal, and I'm hoping to break my record and go through to hopefully Wednesday and do 7 days.
And you reckon that will do you good?
It will, 100%. I already feel it. I'm doing a catalogue of videos that is showing me every day how things are progressing. The first day is hard, as it is always, but as humans, we're not meant to eat 3, 4, 5 times a day.
Right.
It's only just recently we do this. The kind of food I'm presenting to you, I stopped off at the service station as I was travelling in to the studios, and all the food that's in front of you is flashing, buy this, buy that, buy that.
It is.
And you do. And this so-called lunchtime meal that I'm going to present to you, as they call it, a meal deal, well...
Tell me about what damage I'm going to do to myself with this tuna and cucumber sandwich on brown bread.
You're not going to do yourself much damage. I want to get this straight. What I'm presenting to you is choices. You need to know what you're eating for you to make a choice what you want to eat. Now, the bread, if we were to dissect that bread now and open it up, there's not going to be butter in there. So straight away, I'm not happy that there's no butter. I'd rather have something that's organic and natural. There's probably hardly any kind of butter or spread. If you were to open it up, there's probably nothing. The tuna that's in there seems to be very, very mushy. I don't know where it's come from, how it is, what it looks like. They've got to make it in such a way that it's affordable to the consumer. So are they using the best produce? Are they using the best mayonnaise? I don't know.
Now, surely, Sandy, you're going to give me a break on this one.
I'm going to give you a break because
I am now holding up this delicious plate of prawn and egg salad, and it's got all sorts of lovely bits of broccoli in it. Look, a nice stick of broccoli. You're not going to tell me this is unhealthy, are you?
No, it's not unhealthy. Well, again, nothing is unhealthy. It's the amount of sugar that's in the vegetables and meat and food and processed food.
Sugar in vegetables?
Everything. I'm keto and low carb. And if I eat a tomato, it tastes like an apple to me because it's so sweet and beautiful. Now, this is called a sunshine salad because every time I make it, I think of sunshine. And that is only the food that was left over in my fridge freezer, because I'm not eating. I took it out of my fridge freezer. Everybody can make this. There's prawns that were out of the freezer I've defrosted this morning.
Right.
I boiled some eggs luckily I had 2 eggs left over. Okay, so I boiled some eggs. There was some broccoli and a little bit of carrot. I've boiled it up in the kitchen just now and added that to the salad. There's some leftover chicken that was prepared a couple of days ago that, again, I was going to throw out, part of my regime. And I put it all together with some homemade mayonnaise. And that's something that anybody can take in. People think that a salad should be just lettuce and cucumber. It's not. It can be anything. Proof is in the pudding. I put broccoli and carrot on there, which I boiled up. That's another leftover meal.
You've managed to get this to me warm.
Yes.
What? It's not a gazpacho. What is it? Oh, no.
It's a tomato and basil soup.
Tomato and basil.
Tomato and basil, simple. So all I did this morning was roast some tomatoes before I left.
You've been busy, haven't you?
I've been a busy boy. I was up at 5:30.
And all of this when you're not eating, it must be absolute torture.
Well, no, I cook for my clients. So I have a particular footballer I look after, and I don't. He just looks at me like, I can't believe you're not eating, and I won't even taste the food.
That is absolutely delicious. So this one, you give a big tick to this, do you? Your tomato and basil soup.
It's just leftover tomatoes, roasted in the oven, finished off with some chicken or vegetable stock. And if you haven't got chicken or vegetable stock, guess what? Use some water. Blend it up, salt, pepper, bit of basil, you're done. Simplistic.
Now, this looks awful. This looks awful. What is it? Some kind of pasty?
It's a sausage roll, a classic sausage roll.
Sausage roll. I'm not sure I'm even going to try that, actually.
It's from a well-known bakery that everyone possibly goes to.
Yeah, I think I
know.
Now,
the thing is, I get a lot of people saying that we've eaten this all our lives. I get that. I used to eat sausage rolls all the time. I make my own sausage rolls now. The problem is that we don't realise how much meat content is in there. There are some sausages that have 46% meat. So what's the rest of it? They're fillers. They're fillers. And we can get away with that. Back in the day, we used to be able to eat that because, you know what? We weren't eating the kind of foods we're eating today.
Sandy, thank you very much indeed for telling us about healthy and unhealthy foods. I want to thank you, Sandy, but also all of my guests who've been with me today. I'll be back at the same time next week. Until then, I say goodbye. But appearing next on GB News is The Weekend with Dawn Neeson. And so I asked Dawn, what's coming up on your programme?
Thank you very much. You're making me very, very hungry. You could bring some over here if you could, please. Cracking show coming up for you. Don't want to go there. Reform, burkas, large pussies on the loose. You really don't want to miss that bit. Absolutely packed show. Loads coming up for you. Don't move a muscle. We'll see you after the weather. Don't go too far.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast on the Met Office. Well, after a wet day for some of us yesterday, today is offering something a little bit brighter, but still the risk of some showers. So yesterday's rain all moving off now towards the continent. That's allowing this area of high pressure to briefly build in, settling things down a little bit, but there will still be some showers around, chiefly across more northern and central parts. Some of these showers, again, still could be on the heavy side, but in between we will see some spells of sunshine, and especially for us in the south, it will feel a little bit warmer than it did yesterday. We see highs reaching 19, possibly 20 degrees in the odd spot. So as we end out Sunday afternoon across the south, for many southern counties we should remain fairly dry with some late spells of sunshine. But for East Anglia, the Midlands, Wales, continuation of some showers here. And a very similar story for Northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland. But even here, away from any showers, there will still be some late spells of sunshine as we see out the weekend. But do watch out for maybe a more persistent band of rain just arriving into the very far northwest of Scotland. Overnight, the showers becoming a little bit fewer and further between. That will allow more in the way of clearer skies to develop, so that could just allow some mist and fog to form as we go through the morning hours of Monday. But under the clear skies, it will be another fairly fresh night.